Hello there and welcome to yet another edition of The Journal with me, Sean Thomas. Each week we discuss social and national development issues. With us in studio this week is Executive Secretary to the Board of Education, D. Giselle Isaac. Thank you so much for being with us this week.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, Ms. Isaac wears two hats. Of course, that of the Upper House and, of course, General Secretary or Executive Secretary of the Board of Education. How are things at the board?
Things at the board, as they usually are, challenging. But good.
All right.
All things considered.
What are some of the plans in the pipeline? Of course, we're into 2013, but give me a rundown of your more or less plans to either implement or cut back, which is the big word we're hearing now as we face challenging economic times.
The biggest thing for us in 2013 is completing the National Public Library. I know you would have heard that before, but that is our main thrust for 2013, to complete the library, or if not complete it in its entirety in the strict sense of the word, to get it operational for September 2013. Our other goals for 2013 are to keep our head above water. Everybody is crying for money, the lack of money, and we have a number of things that we are mandated to do by law, and we are committed to doing those things. And once those things have been taken care of, we'll see what else we can do. And those things include really the provision of textbooks to all students in Antigua and Barbuda at the primary and secondary level, and the provision of scholarships and awards for tertiary level studies. So those are our priorities by law, and they are the first and second items in our budget. And after that, we support the Ministry of Education in its various endeavors by supporting the curriculum areas and other special projects, and keep our staff happy.
You sort of preempted my thoughts with your very first project that you mentioned, the public library. It has been going on for some time now. Do you think that maybe the Board of Education, which is your responsibility, probably would have taken the slack for doing the wrong thing at the beginning, probably hiring somebody or a contractor who was not able to fulfill?
Well, let me tell you, you have to first qualify the beginning, because we went out on the project from the beginning. I don't even know if you can say we're in the project from the middle, because this is something that I met when I came to the Board of Education in January of 2001. The public library is already in progress. We were given the mandate to finish the construction, and we began that back in 2008 with the understanding from the contractors that they would be done in 9 months, basically, in 2009. However, because the structure had been sitting there for quite a long time, there were a lot of things that just needed to be fixed. And so they went in, and a lot of remedial work had to be done, and things that had been built had to be either taken down or fixed up, and so on and so forth. So that remedial work severely impacted the timeline, and it just ran on and ran on and ran on until the project kind of stopped in 2011. We had some meetings late last year between the board, the contractor, which is ABSEL, Antigua and Barbuda Contractors Enterprises Limited, and the Minister of Finance, and also the Attorney General, in terms of getting this project back on stream. And so some issues that ABSEL had that we were not necessarily aware of at the Board of Education, we got those ironed out. We lost our then project manager, Lucine Hanley, who went back to Public Works full-time, and we now have on board, as of January of this year, the architect, Mr. Lowell Jarvis, who we took on in the capacity of project manager because of his institutional knowledge and having been a part of the project for so long. So we are back on stream for September.
What do you call back on stream? Is work going on?
Work is going on.
Okay.
Yes, we started the year with work going on, and it continues.
Some time ago there was a tag of $4 million to complete it. Where are we now with that?
I wish I knew. I would have said before, probably in this forum, that we had borrowed some money. 2.7 million was the latest amount of money we had borrowed from the Integrated Commercial Bank to finish it. We had borrowed money before that to finish it, and we had gotten a grant from PDV CAB of $3 million to finish it. But this is a hungry project, or thirsty project. It takes a lot of money. And at the end of the day, I'll be able to give you some kind of accounting as to how much we would have spent. I think we're up to something like $9 million already.
Why should a library take $9 million? Would you say that, what would you say to critics who are commenting that you're wasting the money?
I don't think any money, I don't think we've wasted any money.
Not even some of it?
I don't know what went before, but from the time that we took over, I don't know that we've wasted any money. You build a house, you build a regular dwelling home of a certain level and comfort. You're going to spend between $500,000 and $700,000 anyway. That's just a regular family house. We're talking about a library, a public building that is quite big and fairly modern, because some of the things that we met when we took over the project, we had to, as I say, correct, and in some instances we had to improve. For instance, the original structure didn't have AC. And I'm sure you cannot imagine in 2013 life without air conditioning, especially in a building of that size. So we had to correct that. And of course, technology having advanced as much as it has since the days in which the project would have been drawn, the architect would have done drawings, we've had to make significant amendments. So I would not say at all that money has been wasted, except if you're going to say, well, time is money, because things do get more expensive the longer you take to finish a project. But I'm not aware that we've wasted money. And before anybody gets the wrong impression, the Board of Education has not, so to speak, handled the money. The contractors would have done the work would have been certified by the project manager, and then the bank would have paid, or PDVCAP would have paid. So it's not like, we are sitting there doling out money or not doling out money.
Signing checks or anything of that sort?
Only on advice as a project manager. And of course, at the end of the project, we will have an accounting that we will make public.
At this new project manager, you're satisfied that he will be able to deliver. You said come September. You're looking at September as a date to wash your hands from it, pretty much?
I don't want to say wash my hands of it, but I'm looking at September as a date when people will be able to come to the doors and say, I'm here to borrow a book or to do some research, and they're able to do that.
And that's what Antigua and Barbuda has been waiting for the doors to be swung open.
But Sean, when I think about the library, right, I have mixed feelings. Because while I understand that a library, a national library, is important to the life of a country, especially a developing country, so much has changed in terms of library science that the original concept, I think, is probably outdated by now. A lot of the young people that we expect to be using the library now don't have research needs as they were conceived back in those days. Everybody has a BlackBerry, everybody has a tablet. Yeah, so I think we're still going to have to modify when we see what the needs really are.
As you mentioned that, and I mentioned screen people, do you think that books are being faded out or becoming obsolete with the new screen generation that we've?
I think books as we know them will become obsolete, but not day after tomorrow.
Is the library preparing for things like that?
I'm not responsible at all for the operation of the library. Okay. We are charged with finishing the construction project, and so the board does not expect to have any kind of responsibility for the day-to-day running and so on and so forth. I have a feeling that the Ministry of Information and Technology with the Ministry of Education will have more to do with that than what we will.
In terms of finishing the project, are you responsible for furniture and that kind of thing as well?
Not really. No. There was a donation of furniture given earlier by the Hadid family. Sir Ramez Hadid had undertaken that he would furnish a library, and he had indeed purchased the furniture. But this was sitting at the port for so long in containers that we had a lot of, I shouldn't say they had a lot of spoilage, a lot of damage. Shame. Yes. And those things that we were able to save, the board has, where we can refurbish, where we can tidy up. We are already committed to doing that, but we're going to need more furniture. And so I believe the government is going to have to make an appeal to some donors. If
you were to make an appeal now, would you?
Well, to those hearing me, I absolutely believe in patriotism. I believe in commitment, and I think that we need to invest in the things that will last, as in education. And I would certainly encourage anybody who can, any corporate citizen who can make a donation. And I mean, you don't have to give $1 million. You can say, okay, I'm making a commitment to this room and I will donate X number of chairs or whatever. I think that's how you build community, that's how you build a nation. And I believe in volunteerism, and I believe in giving and giving back.
Right. You mentioned the completion date, hopefully September, were you able to rectify that problem with the foundation at all?
The problem wasn't the foundation, the problem was the basement.
Okay.
We had an issue that we discovered back in 2000, probably in 2008, when we went in to do the diagnostic of water coming into the building. And apparently there is an underground stream, because that water has been tested and so many things have been done, and they've not been able to stop water coming up on the site. So they've been able to divert it away from the building, and basically it now runs through pipes down to the country pond. And we're in the process of putting in a retaining wall. So the basement basically has been, that part of it has been sealed off. Okay. The floor has been raised, and they're diverting that water flow. So there's no water coming into the building. The foundation was never the problem. It was just a matter of finding out where this water source was and capping it off.
All right. You're watching The Journal. When we come back, we'll be discussing a bit about maintaining the school plans. Stay with us. You are watching The Journal. Welcome back to The Journal. I'm Sean Thomas. Ms. Isaac, now with the need for increased security presence at schools, I could imagine you've had to pull out some monies from somewhere to do things like fencing and that kind of thing. Where are you in terms of expenditure?
The security problem in schools, I don't know whether to say happily or unhappily. That is not our responsibility. I say happily because it costs so much. Unhappily, we don't have the control. Some of the schools, I think most of the schools probably have a security presence. I don't know how effective it always is. In terms of fencing, most of the schools actually fence, you know. But a fence is not going to keep out somebody who's bent on coming in and stealing or destroying something. So we have the fences, but the fences are not patrolled in the way that we would like. And what we have heard from the security firms is that some of the compounds are large and they're dark. And because a lot of times the security guards are female, they are afraid, being unarmed, to go into the dark corners and see what's happening there. So fences alone do not security make. What I've been appealing for years, Sean, is that communities, because most of our schools sit in communities, very few schools sit in a field somewhere. The one that I can think of really as being a little apart would be the one at Jennings Primary. But generally, the schools are surrounded by homes and small businesses and so on. And I've been appealing to persons to just take an interest in the school, to own it, to see it as part of their community, and look out for its interests and the interests of the children who attend, their children who attend that school. And they see something, say something, as the cops would say, and do something. Call, make a report, make a noise, and I think that would help to deter criminals when they know that other people are watching, other than the security guards. But we are fencing. Every year we make a commitment either to fence or overhaul the fence, but most of them, except maybe for some out in the country, most of the urban schools are fenced.
Okay. You have an idea as to what your budget looks like for fence, well, not only fencing, but your entire budget for...
Entire budget for 2013?
2013.
It's hard to tell because we don't know yet what the library will end up costing. Okay. As I said, we borrowed money, but we've already seen with the resumption of the project that this money might not necessarily be enough because things have gone up in price, and they're always unforeseen things, always in any construction project. So we know the money we've borrowed will not be sufficient. We don't know how much we're going to have to source on our own. But I would say, in general, we are on target to spend maybe around 22 million this year.
Okay. Is your...
Most of it, of course, in scholarships and books.
And books.
Mm-hmm.
Is the book lending scheme doing well? I mean, you've made some calls before for, teachers, students, just to be a little bit more careful with the books.
I think...
Are you getting anywhere?
It depends on the school. Where you have a school with the headmistress, principal, whatever you want to call that person, and the teachers and the parents being invested in the school, as in having a strong sense of ownership, we have a pretty good book scheme. The private schools tend to do better. I'm not sure why. The books last longer, maybe because they insist on them being covered and so on. But the books tend to last longer. We have a shelf life basically of 3 years for a book. And in the private schools, you have books kind of 6 and 7 years old in relatively good condition. Before we instituted our own book scheme managers, it used to be run in the schools basically by teachers, and we give them a small stipend every semester, every term to do that. Back in maybe 2004, I think, we decided that it might be more cost effective for us to handle that ourselves. So the private schools still have the private book managers, but the public schools, we manage that system.
Has it proven to be more cost effective?
Absolutely, absolutely. Between the months of July and August, for instance, the number of parents and students we have coming to pay for lost and damaged books is significant. It used to be that you lost a book, you damaged a book, ho-hum, who cared, right? But now we will run you down and say, if you don't pay for this book, then you're not going to get books in the new school year. And so some of them come kicking and screaming and complaining, of course, but they come in and they pay for those books, and we tend to, we've been recouping significant money. I think last year we probably would have recouped more than $50,000.
In books?
In lost and damaged books, yeah.
That
books
says something.
Yes.
That says something. And this money is used to...
it goes back into the book scheme. It goes back into the book scheme.
What does your book scheme expenditure look like, let's say, on any given year?
Last year I begged and I pleaded and I prostrated myself on the ground and I said, let us try not to spend more than $3 million. I think we spent close to $5 million. This is not always because we're buying new books that were damaged or lost. This is mainly because books change. And I try to tell people that the textbook industry is a business. And if they can make more money, they will make more money. I teach at the Antigua State College in the undergraduate department. I've been teaching a course since 2002. I'm probably up to about my 5th or 6th edition of the same textbook. And it's all the same information. So if you could say to the kids, as I do, it's in this book it's on page 27, in that book it's on page 33, and in the other one it's on page 34. You can use the books, but I don't think people want to go through that hassle. And so they change the books, they put a new illustration or some little chart or graph or whatever, and they say, oh, we have a new edition of the book. And we can't have students using edition 3 and edition 4. So get rid of all the edition 3s and you must buy a whole set of edition 4s. Stuff like that.
With changing books, we have change in curricula as well?
No, you're just changing the books. You change the books. So the people who make books make, I guess, a presentation to CXC, and then CXC will say we're changing not necessarily the curriculum, but the books, that you use in the curriculum. And as I tell people all the time, from the time I was a girl, arithmetic has been the same. I don't know that 2 and 2 have stopped making 4. But they want new math books, you have to buy new math books wholesale. Or I think last year we did new two subjects. I think it might have been math and English or math and social sciences. And as I said, when you're taking out all the books in the system and replacing them with new books, it's a very costly affair.
That, I'm sure, is just one of the many challenges you face. What are your top 2?
Maintenance continues to be a challenge. I don't know what it is about our children, but they simply love throwing things in toilets. They throw things in the bowl, they throw things in the flushing mechanism. They stand on the basins and break them off the wall. And so we have a huge problem with the toilets all the time. People like to kick in doors. I don't know if we have culture? Aspiring karate artists or what, but they like to kick in doors, they like to break windows. So a lot of the money that we spend going back to fix up could really be money that we could spend going forward. But we spend a lot on maintenance.
How does this make you
feel?
We
can spend $1 million a year in small things, locks and fixing windows and buying toilets. $1 million easily. How do I feel? Sometimes I want to throw up my hands. Sometimes I want to say, you know what? Let's close on the toilets and build some latrines. That's how I feel sometimes. But I can't do it, right?
It's a harsh reality, but
yes.
It's just the way, that's the way you have to deal with it. Do you think that private schools are just more careful than public children or public parents? Because if you call a public school PTA meeting compared with a private school PTA meeting, more people always attend. It
depends, Sean. It really does depend. 2 things. I think that people believe when they spend money, when they put their hands in their pockets and spend money, they have to monitor that investment more closely. So they send their kids to a private school and they go to PTA meetings not only because they want to see how their children are doing, but they want to make sure the money they spend is being invested wisely. You send your kid to a public school and we have the idea, well, it's a government job, that not realizing that government gets its money from us. It's taxes, you know, the education levy and so on, that enable schools to operate. So you're still paying for it. So you really ought to be as invested in it as you would be if you sent your children to a private school. But there are some public schools that are very well run and are very well supported by parents. In the past several years, I know for sure when Mrs. Baptist was there, the Artist Comprehensive School, whenever Artist Comprehensive had a problem, they only needed the board to assist because they had a very strong PTA and they would do things like have dinners and so on. I think at one point they bought something like 30 computers for their labs. So all we had to do is help with the infrastructure. I like PTAs in schools like that. There are others who just say, all aboard, you know, so it depends really on the management of the school.
How would you call for investment or greater investment in education then?
How? You mean by the persons who are mandated to manage?
Yeah.
I think training would be helpful, because if you are going to be a principal, you have to know how to manage. It's not just somebody who's come up through the ranks and, well, I've spent 30 years in this profession and now it's my time to get a managerial position. I think you have to show an aptitude for managing people, managing your staff, motivating them, bringing in parents, and you know, inspiring children to be proud of their surroundings, to be proud of their school, and just do the best that they can. So I'm not certain about this, you know, like you get a job because you, as you say, sit on the premises. I want you to stand on the promises and deliver.
All right. Let's touch briefly on your scholarship program. I know that's been running for a couple of years. There are complaints that some benefit and some don't. What would you have to say to people?
Some benefit and some don't from everything in life. But everybody benefits from the education levy in some form or the other. Remember, whether you go to a private school or a public school, you're a beneficiary of the education levy. We supply books to all students, regardless of the school you attend.
But I guess when you're ready for tertiary...
We give supplies to all schools, private and public. When you're ready for tertiary, some get and some don't get as yet. What has been happening in the last few years as money has become scarcer is that more scholarships are awarded to persons who have begun rather than those at the beginning. If you're doing a 4-year degree and you apply in your first year, hardly likely you're going to get funding, because that means we're carrying you for 4 years. If the board, when I say the board, I don't mean the Board of Education, the board, the National Scholarship Board, they award scholarships, we pay, right? So we don't award scholarships. So if the board sees that you have invested your own resources in your first and your second year, they're more likely to give you funding in your third and fourth, or your fourth.
Which is practical.
Right? Because it's practical. Because remember, once you get a scholarship from us and you keep up your grade point average, we are committed to seeing you through. So imagine if we gave everybody a scholarship in their first year. We're talking about every year we're taking on for 4 years for everybody. So we need people to come off the rolls so that we can give to people coming onto the rolls. Right? And we tend to give scholarships based on national need. Well, that's what it's supposed to use to determine the priority areas. So for instance, if you are looking to study something in hospitality or tourism or agriculture, chances are you will get through. Those are always on the priority list. If you say you want to do management studies, well, we have probably 100 applicants every year doing management studies, so that's not necessarily a priority, right? So the more value your major brings to the country, the better your chances are at getting funding.
Of course.
And of course, if you're going to UWI, then you're almost guaranteed funding.
Okay. All right. You're watching The Journal. When we come back, we'll try to get, as Ms. Isaac mentioned, we'll try to get her reactions on the challenge of education levy. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching The Journal. Remember, you can view us on Facebook or send us an email at thejournalantigua@gmail.com. Before the break, you talked about the education levy. Let's talk about who's paying and who is not. Is the government paying as they should, or as it should?
The government pays education levy both directly and indirectly.
Explain that.
Indirectly, which is what we're getting mostly now, we get in-kind payments from the government. We get trade out in services. Persons will remember that we borrowed a significant amount of money from the Caribbean Development Bank back in, I think, 1997, 98 for the basic education project. and that money trained a number of teachers and principals, and when I say a number, a significant number, maybe 50-something of them. And we built a school in Barbuda, and we refurbished or expanded the secondary schools on Antigua. That money has to be paid back. So what the government has been doing is paying that loan for us, together with the other loans that it owes to the Caribbean Development Bank. So we don't have to write a check any month for the CDB. The government pays that. We also get in-kind services from the Ministry of Public Works. For instance, if we have a drainage problem on a school compound, rather than hiring a private, not that we never hire private companies, but rather than hiring a private company, we can speak to the Ministry of Public Works and they will send the equipment and so on. If we have an infestation of termites somewhere, the Ministry of Health will come in, you know, CBH and help out and so on. So government does give in-kind services. Okay. And in terms of clearing books at the port or stuff coming through customs and so on, we get waivers. So government does pay its share in kind, and when it is able, it has in the past given
obligations.
Yes.
What's your beef then? What's your biggest beef with
My biggest beef is those persons who just don't pay at all. I think it is very discriminatory that persons who work in offices, you, me, whose salary comes through an office, a bank, you get your paycheck. You get your paycheck and they show you what the deductions are. You don't get to say, I will pay or I won't pay. You just must pay. It's an obligation that you pay. And then we have other people who have jobs, are gainfully employed, whether they are tailors and seamstresses or they're cooking and selling at the side of the road, selling coal, cane, music, whatever they do, fishermen, taxi drivers, bus operators, and they just won't pay any education levy. The self-employed just feel, a lot of them just feel like their money is theirs. But they send their children to school and they still expect to get all the amenities.
From the state.
From the state, the parent that the children are paying, parents are entitled to. And I think it is very fair, and I see it as discriminating against those of us who do pay. Even seniors have to pay education levy when they've stopped paying social, for instance, because they're over 60. And they have a little part-time job or whatever. Once they're making, in essence, more than $25 a day, they have to pay the levy. Government made a move a couple of years ago which helped us to capture more people, in that a lot of immigrants who are employed as domestic servants, for instance, gardeners and, you know, house healthcare attendants and so on, a lot of them didn't pay because they worked in people's homes. But when they need to get their work permits renewed or time, however that system works, they have got to say, they've got to prove that they are compliant and paying their taxes. So they have to come to the Board of Education to get this letter. And it is then that we discover, oh, they've been living here for the past 11 years. That's when we discovered, I mean, the first year that this thing came in, I think we wrote more than like 18,000 letters, right? And this is when we knew all these people were working and earning and not contributing. So in order to get the letter, they had to be registered and they had to bring their payments up to date.
And 18,000 letters is a cost to the board as well.
Well, we had to start charging for it.
Yeah.
So I think now we charge something like $20 or $25 for the letter, depending on the urgency of it and so on. But these are people that we have been able to bring into the system because they required other services from the state. Just maybe about 2 months ago, we got a letter saying that the fishermen now had to be registered because, you know, everybody wants concessions. Everybody wants government to waive this duty and that duty. Well, okay, we'll waive the duty, but are you paying? Are you paying your taxes? So now they have to come in and register as self-employed in order to get those. And even those persons who are employed as professionals, doctors, lawyers, engineers, architects, again, a lot of them don't pay. And then when you ask them, when you capture them in the net, they pay the minimal figure. Because nobody, no matter how well they're doing, they never admit to making more than $5,000 a month. So we know that they're paying, but they're underpaying. And I think the worst people of all must be the contractors, because their work staff tends to be kind of transitory. You might have 10 people on a job this week and 12 next week and 20 next week, or the week after and so on. And I don't think they're keeping check necessarily, or maybe they are. But we do not get money from most of these construction companies and even the security companies.
How would we bridge that divide? How would we deal with that? I mean,
Well, we're hunting them down. We're
or?
hunting them down. What we're doing is we network with the Intellectual Property Office, where they must register their businesses, and Social Security and medical benefits. Because it's interesting, people will pay Social Security. Nobody minds paying Social Security because they expect to get something out of it on their retirement when they get to pension age, right? And you get a medical benefits card, and there are certain benefits attached to that.
Right.
But they will pay the other two and not pay ours.
Education levy.
So we have to network with these other bodies to see who's registered, and if they're paying this, why aren't they paying that? So we will hunt them down, and we bring them in and tell them that you're breaking the law, you're non-compliant, you need to pay up.
Someone listening to this interview might say, what does she want, us to be a communist state?
No, we want you to be a responsible state. If you take from the state, you must also give where you are obligated to do so. What is wrong with that? Half of the people who are not paying, 3/4 of them, if you gave them a green card today, right, by tonight they'd be gone. When you go to America, you must pay taxes. Uncle Sam will hunt you down. The Inland Revenue Service demands it's due. How is it different here? If you can pay taxes in somebody else's country willingly, why wouldn't you want to contribute to your own when you can see the benefit of it?
But they might claim that, okay, let me leave Antigua and go work somewhere else. I see
So
my
go.
way better.
So go and take your children with you then.
But if Antigua can't even provide jobs, how would the U.S. do that?
Ask the graduates.
That's the problem.
But that's a whole other story. But I figure if you're working here and you're earning here, then you have an obligation to pay your taxes. And those include the education levy.
Certainly. And this affects your ability to meet demands.
Indeed, indeed. We'd have more money to spend if more people paid.
Okay. Your obligations to schools. How does schools feel about you, your support that you lend them? Some schools are complaining that they haven't got enough manila paper and that kind of thing. They're complaining that the board should offer greater assistance.
The board should offer greater assistance?
The Board of Education should give greater assistance to things like material.
I'm sure their schools will tell you the Board of Education should offer school shoes too, right? The people who will be satisfied and there are those who will not be. We give to the schools based on the enrollment of a school. So if you have 500 students, we give you material for 5. If you have 4, you get 4. I'm sure there are schools with 400 who would want materials for 6, but it just doesn't work that way. We also have situations where we give to schools and the teachers themselves or the cleaners themselves will contact the Board of Education and say, don't give so much toilet paper because people here carrying home toilet paper. So we have instances where we supply schools and people on the compound take away the materials.
And there's no way of tracking them down because
unless they're reported, unless of course you have good management at the school. So what we do spot checks to see what they have, what they're hoarding, what they really need, and we also encourage the schools to be self-sufficient. What is wrong with helping yourself?
You mentioned
schools
hoarding.
have what they call mod day. As far as I understand it, you have to pay like $5 or something to be able to wear your own clothing to school. If you have a need, why not do something like that? What is wrong in self-help?
You mentioned hoarding. You're talking about material that would not have been used.
Yes.
What do you do then? You take them back, or?
Yes, we do. I mean, we distribute. One time, some years ago, we went to a particular secondary school. And when I went down to see the bus, the van that they'd gone to pick up the extra materials in, I was amazed. And sometimes the things have expired. If you don't use toner, for instance, it will dry up. Even chalk will become brittle. So they've got stuff, they're not necessarily distributing it to the classes, to the teachers and so on. For what reason, I don't know. And then, you'll have teachers calling the radio station and saying, we don't have this and we don't have that. When we can check our records and we can see what exactly we have supplied. So we have our checks and balances. Stuff like, and a lot of it is abused, Sean. You give a photocopier to a school, right? And all of a sudden, people who work at the school bring in their personal things to be photocopied. They sing on a choir, you volunteer to photocopy all the songs.
Are you serious?
Sunday. I'm serious. People forget things in the photocopier all the time, and so we know what people are using it for. You bring your children's SBAs to be printed out because you're not using your computer, your printer at home. So there's a lot of abuse in the system.
But then they might call for you to be lenient because you mean if I'm working at the school, what is one paper?
With a horse tied to your feet, right? That's our mentality. Is that a good way to run business now?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. All right. I think we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about your new responsibilities having to deal with additional schools for, let's say, the coming year, 2013, 2014, a new one to be built in 5 Islands. Where do you fit in? Stay with us. When we come back, we'll be discussing more of education, particularly from the Board of Education standpoint. Stay with us. You are watching The Journal. Welcome back to The Journal. I'm Sean Thomas. Today we're discussing education from the Board of Education's desk, in fact, from the Executive Secretary's desk. Now, let's talk about the new obligations that you're going to have to deal with somewhere, somehow. That is new secondary schools. Some schools are being changed into from primary to secondary, or junior secondary into secondary. You've had to take that on. You're getting set now to take on, I think, another school in 5 Islands, and of course the others that will be changed to secondary in the next coming months or so. How are you preparing?
You know more than me, obviously. If there are schools that are going to be turned from junior secondary or primary into secondary, I've not been told yet. But since we have experience in that, I imagine that the board will, as usual, rise to the challenge. In terms of new schools coming on stream, all I can say that luckily that's not going to happen this year. Probably not next year. School takes a long time to build. And if you're getting funding from an overseas agency like the Caribbean Development Bank or something like that, there's so much paperwork, there's so much preparatory information and whatnot that has to take place first. That the construction, I can't see any construction beginning in 2013, maybe 2014. So that gives us time. Hopefully the economy will pick up a bit. That gives us time to better plan, because even though we are not mandated by law, the board for the last, well, however long since I've been there, has been responsible for maintenance of the schools. So we would need to, we would need the time to plan, really. Especially if we don't get more money coming in. It means that in order to expand our maintenance, we might have to drop some other areas from our roster.
But with the advent of universal secondary education, students would probably be passed through a bit faster. We're thinking, we're not sure if that's how it would work. It means then that you might have to double up in terms of turnover of books and equipment and material and all that.
Well, we have to provide books and we have to provide scholarships. Those are the two things we have to provide under law. And as I tell my staff all the time, if it comes to where we have to make a choice, everything else will have to go, because we are mandated to provide these two things. So if universal secondary education means that we have to take the book budget from 5 million to 7 million a year, the 2 million will just have to come from other areas. So we'll do less of something else in order to meet that obligation.
But you've already been borrowing and borrowing and borrowing.
No, I don't mean in borrowings. I mean in other areas. Cutting, maybe we'll stop fencing schools, or maybe we will stop providing toilet paper. But we spend a lot of money on toilet paper, by the way. Both toilet paper and printing paper spend quite a lot of money. Garbage bags and so on, those are huge expenditures. So if it means that we will have to stop doing those things and some other government agency will have to pick them up, then that's what it will have to be.
Somebody might be saying, she's talking rubbish. You can't ever stop buying toilet paper or garbage bags, or even cut back, or think about cutting back.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. If our income remains the same and our expenditure looks like it's going up, I mean, if you're in a household and somebody stops working or you, whatever, and you have $5,000 a month in expense, and you have $5,000 a month in, and you have $4,000 a month in income, don't you have to cut something?
No.
People get rid of their cable, people say, okay, I'll stop using my car, I'll take the bus or whatever.
Carpool,
the same carpool, whatever, the same premise applies to running a statutory board successfully. It's easy to say borrow, 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 but money has to be paid back. And I think we have a very responsible board and a very responsible management team, and we don't intend to get ourselves into that kind of problem. We're in over our heads. I think somebody was telling me the other day in Guyana, children take their toilet paper to school. Toilet paper and Dettol is like part of the book list. So what we have to do, we will have to do, Sean. I'm not going to make any promises that we can't afford to keep.
But these are very tough and hard times, so more or less you've got to do what you've got to do, innit?
As people have to as well. The same thing you have to do, economize in your home, you have to economize as well.
Okay, I'm going to play a use and catch here because you wear two hats, that of Speaker of the House and, of course, executive secretary at the board, but very recently I can imagine you're human like anybody else, and you've had to deal with something that I'm sure most people would not want to deal with. And how many of us really look at Parliament ball by ball or word by word to follow all the standing orders
Only
and
me.
everything else? Only you.
Only me.
No. What was last week or a few weeks ago like for you in Parliament having to deal with that situation?
You mean this week?
This week.
It was Monday that we were in Parliament.
How do you feel?
With everything that I have to do in life, especially in my professional life, I prepare. I educate myself. What I don't know, I put myself in a position to know, whether by doing my research or asking others. And I think that if more of us did that, we would be much more educated and much less opinionated. So I prepared as much as possible for Monday's sitting because I thought it had the potential to get off track. And it did get off track because people took a political slant of what really ought to have just been a procedural matter in terms of applying the standing orders. And it's unfortunate that persons who know better would not lead by example.
Let me ask you though, is it a situation where standing orders are given to all of the members?
Every one of them. And they are members in the House much longer than me. So I don't have any secret stash of information that the others don't have. We all have the same standing orders.
The way you handled the situation, was it out of the norm, or has something like this ever happened before that you were able to draw on?
We have had, no, and quite frankly, across the region, this has not happened before. So we had to go outside of the region. We sought information, for instance, from Jamaica and Trinidad in terms of what this looked like, how we should handle it, and so on and so forth. And then we looked at procedures in Great Britain and Canada and Nigeria. And we were satisfied that, and I say we because I work closely with the Attorney General, and we were satisfied that legally and procedurally we were doing the right thing, because this might have been a situation that had never happened before, in that the Senate had never sent back a bill with basically an outright rejection of all the clauses. Mm-hmm. But the standing orders are clear on how you treat bills that come back from the Senate. And we said, okay, we looked at the standing orders, we looked at the Constitution to make sure that we were within the four corners of both. And of course, the standing orders are guided by the Constitution. And we were satisfied that this should be treated just as any other bill. If the bill had come back from the Senate saying, move A and make A C, and delete B,
or change a clause,
or change whatever, we would have considered those recommendations from the Senate. It came without, so they didn't leave us anything to consider, to change. So we just said, okay, you've not sent anything else for anything back for us to take a relook.
So then there's no debate.
We have nothing to debate, so we're just sending it back to you and saying, we don't have anything to change, just take a look at this again. That is what happened. The bill was not reintroduced, there's nothing to debate. The bill as it stood had already passed the lower house. So there's no way on the law it could have come back. And I am not a person who would ever have presided over a breaking of the rules and they'd enforce them, you know. And so it could not have come back for debate. So when people stood up and said, you know, we're trying to reintroduce the bill, no such thing. The bill was never down for debate. All it was is a resolution, and the resolution is an agreement that we will send this back to the upper house with a message saying, we stand by the bill and we would like you to look at it again. Simple as that.
You think people are just misinformed as to how the standing orders should work?
I think they're misinformed in some instances. In other instances, they just don't know because it has never happened before. So they don't have anything to draw on, to look at and to take notes from and so on. So it calls for some introspection, some interpretation and so on and so forth, as what does this mean and how do we proceed. And in other instances, people don't want to think, people don't want to read, people just want to be told, and if somebody says this is so, they just run with this is so. But I can't deal with opinions and feelings, I have to go by the standing orders.
But by right, I mean, why not just use the information for what it is? Do you
Because
think that is a breakdown in just the way we think, or?
Information is a political thing. You give it or you withhold it, and it has implications whether you share it or you withhold it. So, and we have not learned to respect information for information's sake. We always look at information as a means to an end. What will it get me, or where will it get me? You know, so we trade in information as if it's some kind of currency, when really and truly information is for education.
If you were to do this over again, what would you have done differently?
Over this issue?
Yes.
Not a thing. Not a thing. Because it is the only thing that I could have done.
According to standing orders,
according to standing
the way
orders,
you
according
should
to the
preside.
Constitution, I am satisfied that I did my homework. I am satisfied that the right course was followed.
All right. Any final comments? I'm going to ask you to change your hats back now and go back to the Board of Education. Any final comments?
My final comments basically is education is a national effort. It's not the Board of Education's responsibility. It's not government's responsibility. I always say to people, I don't understand how people want to just say, that's government's job. We criticize government, whoever's in government, for whatever. They can't build roads, they can't run hospitals, they can't do this, they can't do that. And you want to just hand over the education of your children to them? Be more involved. Pay your taxes, get involved in your schools, and educate yourselves.
But the small mind, you mentioned paying taxes. The small man might think, or as you mentioned earlier, somebody who sells at the side of the street or something, might think, I'm not even making enough money to feed my home. How am I going to pay taxes?
Nobody if he's not making $25 a day, he wouldn't be on the street. And $25 a day is the minimum. Once you make more than $25 a day, you have an obligation to pay your education levy. And how is it that you can't afford to pay your education levy, but that you want to put more children in the system?
And if you're looking at school children, some of them are in the latest brands, and these are the same parents.
Matter of priorities. Matter of priorities.
How would you call on persons like those to invest greater in education then?
No, they would have to educate themselves first in order to know the value or the non-value of what they're doing. We need to teach our children the things that last, not the things that are in fashion. Education is always in fashion now.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Isaac, for joining us here on The Journal. It has been a privilege having you here.
Thank you, Sean.
We'll certainly invite you back as new things develop and as you continue to face the challenges at the Board of Education. All the best to you and the staff there.
Thank you, too.
Thanks again. This is The Journal. Remember, you can email us at thejournalantigua@gmail.com. View this episode on Facebook or also on YouTube. That's all for now. I'm Sean Thomas. Bye-bye.